Well, good afternoon, Nzinga, and to our viewers. Emotional scenes played out for the better part of the morning. Of course, it's an operation that started very early in the morning. Around 4 o'clock this morning, police started, of course, filling this part of Brooklyn in Pretoria. We are literally in front of the UNHCR offices where the refugees have been camping since 2019. And most of them, of course, have already left. They eventually surrendered, although throughout the week they made it very clear that they will not leave, many of them becoming very adamant that they would rather die here before being removed. But after, I guess, when they saw the amount of law enforcement officials that were deployed here, Nzinga, we had perhaps about 6 Nyalas and a whole lot of police officers, immigration officials, officials from Home Affairs, Social Development, a lot of social workers that also joined the group, a lot of water cannons. So police were clearly on a mission, and they were making sure whatever happens, they have to obey the court order that, of course, sanctioned the eviction of the refugees. In front of you, you would remember we did interviews for the past 2 days here. There were structures that were part of this particular section of the pavement here outside the UN offices. That was the scene since 2019. And you can see there municipal officials, municipal workers are busy with the mop-up operations. And this, of course, signaling the end of the camping that was taking place here since 2019. I want to bring in one of the CPF members here in Brooklyn. Just introduce yourself and really tell us, the refugees that have been living here, what was the impact of their stay in the community or on the community?
Good afternoon. I'm Reinhard from the Brooklyn CPF. From our side, we are happy with the outcome of today's operation. In this area, we have seen a particular upbeat in our petty crimes. And as we started breaking down the structures now today, the SABC K9 units also found an amount of drugs. And we also know the area for is alcohol misuse in the area.
All right, thank you so much. I'm going to keep it brief. I also want to bring in Gerard here. He is the ward councillor. We started our interviews with him this morning. And of course, now we want to get the wrap of what has happened. Gerard, it's been a busy day. Very emotional, very sensitive. We saw how the women were crying. We saw the accusations, that were hurdled, small children crying and so forth. And I was even saying earlier that, for you not to be touched by what happens here, you really perhaps not human. It touched all of us. But we heard that the law had to be enforced. Bring us up to speed. We understand some have been taken to Lindela. Others are arrested or have been taken to police stations, and there's a large group that has decided that they will see for themselves what is next.
That's correct. So today was a great success, a joint operation with many role players. So I'm very grateful for that. Fortunately, no incidents of violence took place today. All in all, 10 people have returned or have voluntarily decided to return to Lindela Repatriation Centre by the Department of Home Affairs. 6 people were arrested for being illegal immigrants, and the rest of the group have vacated the area voluntarily. So they have taken their belongings and they are now on their way to, I'm not really sure, but they're on their way out of the area and away from the United Nations building.
As we all not sure where they're going, there's a group down there that's still there. Of course, up the road, that structure is still there. We see there are a lot of women that they're still packing their stuff up the road. But rightfully so, you're saying that we do not know where they're going. Are you not worried about the safety of, in particular, the women and children who do not know where they are going? That's the one. And are you not worried that they might settle somewhere else?
No, it's definitely a concern. But it also needs to be understood that an offer was made to them. 6 months accommodation, bedding, food for them and their children, a roof over their head at Lindela. They've refused that, and they've chosen to rather stay on the road. So as much as I feel for them, I also think that they had the decision, they had the option to go to a place where they could continue with their lives, send their kids to schooling and so forth, but they didn't choose that.
But talking about kids going to school, they lived there and their kids didn't go to school.
So it must also be understood that when they were at Lindela, they had the option to leave any time, and the same option is given to them with this court order. They could enter and leave any time. So it must be important to note that Lindela is not a permanent solution. It's a place where they can sleep in a bed at night, they can get food, but at the same time they can get the necessary help so that they can get back on their feet, reintegrate into communities and start their lives again, send their kids back to school and so forth.
Which is that help? Many of them were actually kicking and screaming, saying that that's exactly their big fear. They do not want to go back to Lindela. They were saying that they have suffered grave atrocities while they were in Lindela, human rights violations, and so forth. Of course, we don't have the evidence of some of these things, the allegations, but it does get concerning when so many people are echoing the same story. So is there any way to perhaps regulate their stay there to at least make sure that their human dignity is protected while they are at Lindela?
So look, we've all heard the stories and we all heard their side of the story. But at the same time, I've spoken to people who work at Lindela. I've spoken to the many officials from the Department of Home Affairs today. And they say it's completely baseless. They say that, they can have a life there. It's not as atrocious as the refugees make it sound out to be. So I think this is all just a stunt. This is all just a stunt for them to get media attention. And we all read the newspapers. We all read the the news headlines saying that they'd rather die than go back to Lindela. But today, I think, was a great success. The goal was to evict them, get them out of the area, get them to a place of shelter. Unfortunately, they didn't take that option. And we'll have to see what happens next.
All right, thank you so much. Of course, that is exactly the focus of the story now. What happens next? Over 90 of them have taken their own route. They have, gone wherever. One wonders, where will they be settling? Are they going back to the respective communities where they used to live before they fled because of the so-called xenophobic outbreaks, wherever they were? Some were in Sunnyside and are saying that they were apparently targeted by police at the time, and some of the groups who did not want them in the respective communities, such as Pretoria West as well. That's another area that they have mentioned. And we can just wonder whether they will be safe where they're going to. As much as, yes, they may not be originally South Africans, but the issue of human rights remains pivotal in situations like that, in particular where small children are involved. One wonders whether the dignity of these children will be protected, whether they will be well registered and documented within the country's systems so that their parents do not lose them if they do get separated in any way. But of course, we will try perhaps in the next couple of days to track some of the refugees who are staying here to find out where have they now find their feet, where is their next home, how does life look like wherever it is that they decided to go to. But of course here you understand it was a situation that was also not of human dignity. It was unconducive. They were living in makeshift structures. One can just wonder what happened when there were heavy rainfalls in particular during, your summer periods. You understand that they actually technically spend about 3 summers here. So they experience, the harsh conditions of heavy rains for that duration. So it was really a long time. And of course, the freezing winter periods that they also spend here, the health-related risks that they may have faced as there was no running water. Of course, we understand that there's a Catholic church just around the corner that really played a very vital role in helping them, in particular to make sure that they've got clean water every day. And there are other good Samaritans around this community that also aided with food, blankets, and all the other necessities that they needed in the period that they lived here. But nevertheless, there was serious health risks, in particular the fact that there was no proper sanitation. And many of the community members were complaining about the stench here, but they stayed put, saying that, they do not want to be in South Africa anymore. They also do not want to go back to their countries of origin. Many of them coming from the DRC, saying that they fled there because of a war, because of the ongoing conflict in that particular country. Burundi is another country where we've heard the similar testimonies that, of course, came out of, from the stories that we heard the refugees sharing here. There's also been a lot of frustration and outcry leveled against the UN. Many of them saying that they fled to the UN offices when they ran out of options, when their lives were in danger. Of course, they fled their countries of birth. They came to South Africa and they faced another onslaught. And then when they ran out of options, they came here hoping that the UN can give them refuge. The UN can give them relief and perhaps protect them. And their biggest demand was for them to be taken to third countries. But the UN made it very clear that it's impossible. They cannot resettle them in other countries. It is not the UN's right or jurisdiction to get involved in the affairs of another country. And it is on that premise that the UN also could not interfere after the court order was obviously given that compelled these refugees to leave, and for the law enforcement authorities today to take that firm stand, that firm action to make sure that they are removed here. The UN saying that this is South Africa's a sovereign country. The South African law reigns supreme. For now, all they can do is to appeal for, peaceful mediations, if there is still room to mediate in the situation moving forward. Lawyers for Human Rights has also echoed the same sentiment, saying that they are just appealing that the human rights of these vulnerable and desperate refugees not be compromised. They understand that the law has to be protected. They understand the cries of the homeowners in this particular area who have complained about the value of their properties that have been affected by the refugees that have been living here. So it is really a situation that's very complex if you hear from everybody involved. But the UN saying that they just, hope that the children in particular, and that is what the lawyers for human rights are also saying, that the children need to be protected. We'll see next week, perhaps, when we take the story forward, what happened to the children? Where are the rest of the group that decided to take their belongings and, find their own future or find their own survival wherever it is they might find themselves? Nzinga.